Hello and welcome to Quarantimes. I'm your host Reema Gupta, and with me today I have Shalini Warrier, Executive Director, Chief Operating Officer, and Business Head of Retail at the Federal Bank. Shalini, welcome to the conversation. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you very much, Reema. Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here.
So Shalini, as you know, we are living in very unprecedented times. We are under this lockdown 21 situation. A lot of countries are struggling with handling the pandemic, and they're taking all precautionary measures to be able to help first focus in on health and making sure public health is the top priority for everyone. But one of the side effects and casualties in this war is, of course, our economy. And there has been a lot of impact because of the closure. Given that you're from the banking sector and you have a much larger perspective, I would love to get your thoughts on the impact of the lockdown on the Indian economy. Do you believe it's going to be short-term or long-term? And specifically, if you could talk a little bit about if there are particular sectors you feel are going to be more impacted versus others.
Thank you, Reema. You're right. The economic implications of COVID-19 are something which all of us need to be cognizant of and conscious of. In the case of India, what happened actually was we were going through a low growth phase even before we entered the pandemic because of various reasons on the back of demonetization, GST, the insolvency bankruptcy code, and a whole range of measures that the government was taking. There was an issue with the economy and the growth. And now with the pandemic out there, it's obviously made the situation, in my view, a tad worse. One kind of redeeming factor is we're all in it together. The world at large is facing this challenge. So India is not the only one facing this pandemic. Having said that, my view is that we are going to go through some troubled times. The next 6 months in particular are going to be quite tough. Having said that, I do believe, and as a community, we all believe that after the next 6 months, things will start getting better. It will take about 12 to 18 months for the economy to completely recover because these are not easy circumstances to come by. Unlike the financial crisis of 2008, which was purely a financial crisis, this one we've got a compounding effect of a medical crisis and an economic crisis. So it will take about 12 to 18 months for things to become all right, but we will start seeing the shoots of recovery from 6 months from now. The fact that China has, for example, got back into starting to do manufacturing and, things are opening up in China gives all of us hope that once we get over this phase, we'll be able to get back into growth phase. All sectors will face some issues or the others. We are an intertwined economy. It's not any one sector that can be isolated. But having said that, I think if you were to pull out a couple of sectors that will probably be most impacted, I think it will be tourism, hospitality, real estate, aviation, anything which has kind of, social distancing norms become difficult to implement on a sustainable basis. Those sectors will be immediately impacted. So I think that's really the background to what I think will happen. The next 6 months are going to be very critical. What we as individuals do, what corporates do, what the government does will help set the stage for a 12 to 18 month recovery. But the redeeming thing is that we're all in it together, and I'm sure we'll overcome these issues.
Sure. So maybe just to build on this thought process, we have heard, as you rightly said, the whole world is going through this together and we are all in it together. We've seen a lot of stimulus packages announced by different countries, and some of them are quite large, especially if you look at developed nations. They have put in huge packages to help the economy revive. But compared to that, there has been some criticism of the Indian government of not having put enough. We think it's only about 1% of our GDP that we have currently announced fiscal packages. And that's also to help, rightly so, the lowest economic strata, right? The people who are getting impacted the most. Maybe if you could expand a little bit from what are additional measures that the Indian government can take to stimulate the Indian economy, and where should they focus?
So I think two parts to it. You're right. The Indian government currently has been focusing on the relatively more disadvantaged population and the sections of the public that are disadvantaged, which is great. The direct benefits transfer that they're doing for those disadvantaged will help overcome the next 3 months. Having said that, I don't think we should look at that in just by itself. It's going to be a series of measures, and it's no one single measure that will help get the economy right. So my view is that over the next 6 months, we'll see the government coming out with more and more other measures that are designed to, to rejuvenate the economy, and we just have to wait and watch for that to happen. Having in parallel to that, but the RBI has come out with some very good measures over the last few days. They advanced the monetary policy, as we know, they brought it forward. And in that, the focus of the RBI has been primarily at two pillars. One is infusing liquidity into the banking system. So clearly, banks cannot lend unless they have liquidity. A large part of the liquidity is dependent on customer deposits, but in this day and age, customer deposits may get used for other things that the customer has as higher priority. So just infusing liquidity was one big objective which RBI achieved, and they did that through various measures, reducing the CRR, greater access to long-term funding, etc. So banks now have the confidence that from a liquidity standpoint, we're comfortably placed to be able to lend to customers. In our case, for Federal Bank, Touchwood, we've always had a very good liquidity profile, but this has given us more confidence to be able to lend. So that's one set of actions that the RBI has taken. The other set of actions has been, the moratorium for repayments. So RBI has very kindly announced a 3-month moratorium where customers don't need to pay their term deposit, their term loan installments for 3 months, March, April, May. The interest has been, deferred. The installments have been deferred, and working capital norms have been eased up a little bit to help customers from a cash flow perspective. So I think with what the government has done so far in terms of direct benefit transfer, plus what is definitely in trail and will come over the next few months while we get out of this pandemic, etc., as well as what RBI has done and will continue to do, I'm sure, I think we are very clearly well positioned to be able to take care of the stimulus. It's very difficult sometimes to replicate what other countries do because our economy is our economy. It's a unique economy in itself. Each state is very different. How each state is coping with the pandemic is different. What the requirements of each state are different. So the government will, in my view, come out with further measures, as will RBI.
Sure. No, those are great. So maybe we can transition now to understanding your customer base, and maybe if you could tell us a little bit more about, are you working with MSMEs? What is your customer base feeling like, especially given that you work with retail, right? Are they feeling anxious? What are you doing to kind of reduce the anxiety levels, to let them know that this credit is available? And especially because we have a huge set of MSMEs, which are, one of the things that has been pointed out is that nearly 25% of MSMEs may shut shop because of the uncertainty of the situation and the cash crunch that they might face.
I'll probably split it into a couple of parts. The first part of it is just a regular customer service. Banking is an essential service, as we know. Even during pandemic times, we've been making sure that the banks are open and ready for business. So we have been ensuring that all our branches are open and continue to render service to the customers. We've opened our branches for things like pension distribution, the direct benefit transfer that the government had announced, that was open. Customers could come and withdraw. Our ATMs are functioning. So just keeping the services going gives, in our view, more confidence to customers. If banks start shutting down, customers will, get more and more anxious and nervous. And we've ensured, Federal Bank, as has the banking community at large, has ensured that our banks and ATMs continue to open and continue to function. We've also been doing a lot of work to encourage customers to move into more digital means of operating. So we have seen an increase in propensity to use digital. We had made some good advances after demonetization, but it had plateaued to some extent. Now this has given us a trigger for customers to start using digital more extensively and use it more sustainably so that they don't need to endanger themselves or the bank staff by coming into the branches. So that's one part of what we've done, just making sure services are available to customers on an ongoing basis. And that, in our view, helps to reduce the level of concern in the minds of the customers that the bank is there to help them. The second is in terms of the moratorium and what we've done around the moratorium. So obviously we've made sure that all our customers are aware of the moratorium. We both retail, MSME, agri. We have a lot of agri customers. agriculture-oriented customers, all of them have been made aware of the moratorium, and we've been guiding them on what's the right way to take advantage of the moratorium. We've also been guiding them to say, use it if you think your cash flow is impacted, because it's not a waiver, it's a moratorium. So, 3 months later, you'll have to pay it with interest. So a lot of advice has been given to them to structure it in such a way that they use it. They may not use it for all 3 months. They may use it only for April. If things get better in May, they should be able to pay. So various things have been done to educate them and use them as opportunities to, structure their cash flow in an appropriate manner, so that their credit history is duly protected with the bank and with the banking community as a whole. Turning to MSMEs in particular, I think that's clearly something that's, really very critical. They are a very critical ingredient in the economy of any country, and particularly in the economy of India. And in situations like this, they tend to be the ones first impacted, because they're at that, that fulcrum where the customer meets the manufacturer, so they're at that part of the cycle. So for MSMEs, we have a fairly large business banking business and MSME business. So we've worked with them on the moratorium, as I said. We've also started work with each one of them to structure their working capital cycle, to look at their working capital cycle and see what adjustments need to be made to, get the cycle to move once the pandemic is over, once the lockdown is over. That means, drawing power, for example, which is the amount that they can draw from the bank, has been made a little more flexible, so that it takes into account the longer cycles that are there for their creditors to repay them, etc. We've also been encouraging MSMEs to approach their customers and keep in touch with their customers during this period of time, so that they know what their customers are going through and what the likely orders are going to be in the future. What's the status of payments that are coming? So there's a lot of advice to the MSMEs to say, this is the time to focus on cash and cash flow. Everything else is subsidiary to it. Please spend time looking at your cash flow, your creditors, your debtors, how do they structure, what is it that they need help on. Keep in touch with your customers, know what your order book looks like, so that in the future you can structure your order book correctly. And so cash is king ultimately. So, and that's been our advice to MSMEs. So different approaches for different sets of customers depending on their needs, but underpinning it all is the fact that our services are open and customers are able to come at any point in time. Obviously, we've put in safety measures, not more than X number of customers in the branch at any point in time. We make sure that we have sanitizers available. We make sure that hand washing facilities are available. Outside every branch, we have hand washing facilities available. So we've taken all the usual safety measures that are required. Our staff have also been given gloves and masks, etc. But we are open for business.
Oh, that's fantastic. No, it's great. It gives a huge confidence to customers. I know that when I do see my bank branch also open, it just, there's no panic, right? And there's no rush.
Yes.
Where is my money safe? So I think great service to the nation. I think hats off to you and your whole team for being operational in this time. I think just building on this, right, from an employee perspective, right? So we've heard from your customers and how important it is to keep the customers engaged and know that you're there. What about your employees? Could you talk a little bit about, how has the working style changed? You did mention that you're providing all of them with safety equipment and, training them with it. But is there some things that have changed? Like I'm hearing, especially in the tech industry for sure, that the way to work is completely changing. A lot of people are able to work from home, things that we didn't think were possible are now possible. And so from a banking perspective and employees, are you getting the same amount of staff? Have you reduced staff? How is it?
So, like I said, we've done all the required safety measures to keep our employees safe and secure. So sanitizers, masks, gloves, etc. have been provided. We've also adopted split working. So in our branches, what we have said is there is no need for all of you to come every day. So we do a 50-50, which means that on certain days, 50% of the staff come in. On the rest of the days, the other 50% come in. That ensures that the branch is open, is able to serve customers, but at the same time ensures social distancing norms are practiced, and customers and staff have enough space between them so that the social distancing norms are not adhered to. So that's the 50-50% working. We can't do a complete work from home, as you know, because our branches need to have staff at the front line attending to customer queries, looking at customer papers, etc. But in some of functions, more of our control functions that are in head office, we have done a work from home. We've given adequate technology equipment to ensure that people can work from home. So we've done that for some of the head office oriented functions, but not at the branches. The branches are more tuned to a 50-50 working, so that we keep in touch with, while we're there for the customers, at the same time safety and security is ensured. We've also done something else to ensure that our services continue running, notwithstanding any potential calamity in any part of our operations. So from a technology and operations perspective, we've actually carved out a team of people. And these are, we've looked at the critical functions that need to be ensured every day to make sure the bank continues to run. These are things like, your systems have to keep running, your end of day processes have to happen, your digital transactions have to go through correctly. So there are a range of critical functions. We've carved out a team of people who we've actually, to a large extent, isolated them in our training center. And, they live there, they work out there, they're not allowed out at all. Because it's got adequate accommodation, because it's our training center. So it's got enough rooms for all of them to be accommodated. And that group has been literally isolated in that center since the start of the lockdown. And we expect that will continue for a few more days till the lockdown is done. We did that taking into account our business continuity plans, and in a bid to ensure that if any other building were for some reason quarantined or isolated, at least we're very sure that this unit will continue to run the operations for the bank. So that has ensured that, our operations continue to run. So it's no one single measure, but it is a range of things that we've done to make sure staff are safe and customers continue to get the service they deserve.
Now, that's good to hear. My next question is regarding, a lot of changes have happened. We are kind of getting used to a new style of living as well as a new style of working. So yes, given all these conditions, what, in your opinion, are things that have permanently changed our way of thinking, Some things we never thought would be possible. And again, I'll give you an example from academia and education, where we always thought, especially for certain kinds of education, like an executive education and stuff, where we needed more face-to-face and conversations in a classroom, because there's a lot of group discussion involved. Suddenly everything has moved online, and that's kind of changed our perspective also as to what we thought was not possible, but thanks to technology it is now possible. So could you share a few things from, you had mentioned that in your banking especially, you're looking at technology as a big enabler, and a lot of people, although the demonetization had given it a push, this is another push to adopt digital technologies and work with them. So could you give a few examples that you feel have permanently changed perspective and thinking?
So I think, clearly, there will be a time in history when we will write about a pre-COVID area and a post-COVID area. The post-COVID era is going to be very, very different from the pre-COVID one, in my view. And I think that's a view that's endorsed by a lot of people around, bankers as well as non-bankers. One of the things that will definitely change, which I alluded to earlier, was this whole digital piece. Demonetization had started that journey, but I think this has given it a push far beyond even our own imagination. And it's a lot to do with the adoption of digital by corporates. So retail, I think, had already moved a lot into digital. 90% of our transactions done by a retail customer were anyway digital. That can, at the best, become 95 or 98 maybe. But corporates were always a little more hesitant. I think they had a lot more, risk considerations in their mind, a lot more convenience of just sending all the papers to the bank and the bank doing the needful. But now, our corporates have also had to adopt digital. So I think the big change is going to be in digital, and with particular focus on the corporates moving more and more into the digital agenda. That's one kind of change that is happening. The other change is the fact that, now, in my view, things like travel and, just zooming across cities for the purpose of face-to-face meetings are going to see a reduction. Not just during the lockdown period, not just per force because there are no aeroplanes floating around or that, but because I think it's become a way of life. Today, a large part of our meetings, we continue to do meetings obviously, but earlier we may have done it face to face, but now we're moving more and more into using technology of various kinds like video conferences and conference calls, etc. That will, I think, become a way of life because people have recognized that it is as effective. It's in fact more productive probably from a time perspective. Costs are much lower, and therefore the benefits of it have now become evident to people. So I think remote, second piece is going to be this whole thing around travel. The third is this whole work from home. I must admit banks were probably the slowest on this curve of work from home. We recognize completely that in the case of branches, it's not possible to do that. But there are a range of functions which are not really branch-centric, meaning they don't need to be at the branch serving the customer. They're still serving the customer, but in various other ways. A lot of those functions can now become work from home, and we are going to be encouraging a lot of people to look at work from home options because we do believe it will give us benefits in the form of reduced costs and greater productivity. And like I said, technology companies were at the forefront of adopting work from home, but banks have also realized that it can work for us also. So that would be another area. The last, not the least, actually, I think, in my view, productivity demands will go up from the banking industry as a whole. Even within ourselves, I've been, telling my team that post-COVID, the productivity demands will be much higher from all of us, primarily driven by the fact that there is a slowness in the slowdown in the economy, revenue could be at risk, etc. So what can we do from a productivity standpoint? So this whole ability and agility of innovation will increase manifold over the coming weeks, in my view. Finding new ways of doing works, finding new ways of becoming more productive, will definitely become a way of life. Just as an example, we use robotics process automation for some of our processes. We have about 130 processes already automated using RPA. And one of the benefits we saw, we were always keen to do RPA from a productivity standpoint, efficiency, error rate reduction, etc. But during this period of COVID, etc., what we realized was, and another benefit that came out from RPA was that the bots work on their own as long as they're scheduled correctly, and they don't need a human being around to do them. So we had lots of processes that continue to run on their own, despite the fact that the person concerned may not have been able to reach office. So to my team, I've been saying, listen guys, this is benefit of RPA that we always knew, but you've seen it in operation now. So why can't 130 processes on RPA become 260 and then 500? And so this whole productivity agenda is going to get a much needed fillip in the context of COVID. So yes, change is going to happen, and it's going to happen across customers and us as bankers. But change is definitely, the post-COVID era is going to look very different.
Sure. No, thank you for sharing those insights. I think I hear the whole concept of robotic process automation and a lot of technology being used. And I think this was what we call in economics an exogenous factor, right? That kind of drove us on this path. We were moving slowly, and maybe it's just accelerating our...
Yes, absolutely.
So my next question is around, right, I think this is a big dark cloud, but there are a lot of silver linings that we, everyone is looking at how can I help, right? So could you talk a little bit from your perspective and your bank perspective, what is it that you are doing to contribute to the fight against COVID-19?
No, that's a very good question, Rima, and it's clearly something that this has become a rallying call for a lot of us to really recognize what we can do as individuals and as corporates. So from a federal bank perspective, one of the first things we recognized was the most vulnerable in this day and age of lockdown are the daily wage earners. Lots of vulnerabilities, but I think the daily wage earners, in my view and in the organization's views, are the most vulnerable. So we chose to say, let's work and focus on doing what we can for that group of people who live by the day and without a day's work are unable to get their next meal. So we started an initiative for voluntary contribution from both staff and customers. we actually developed kind of, easy to use website where you could go and make your contributions, etc. And, it was amazing the kind of contributions we got from staff as well as from customers. And what we said was, for every rupee you contribute, we have a foundation that does CSR. The foundation will do an equal contribution. And so we garnered a lot of money using that. And we've, the first tranche has been identified. So we've focused on two main things out of the first tranche. One is around this whole wage earners piece, and the other is around research and kits, etc., for COVID-19 detection. On the wage earners piece, we chose two main projects. One was in Delhi with Helpage India, which was doing some work in that area of, dealing with migrant laborers and making sure they got adequate food every day. So we sponsored that piece with Helpage India in Delhi. And the other was in our home state, Kerala, where there has been a concept of community kitchens that the government has started. And we've decided to sponsor a few community kitchens in and around near our head office. So that was what we did from a wage earners perspective, and making sure it's all right for them to get food every day. The other was we funded a research in an institute out of in Kerala, which is looking into detection kits and related aspects for COVID-19. So we've identified two projects in that realm, and we funded that. So we used the money for two pieces of it. One, a little more long-range, far-reaching implication for research, etc., and the other more immediate term for the wage earners. So I think that was our contribution. We are still, still looking at other sources. I mean, we're still getting some funds from customers, from staff, etc. So we are accumulating that, and we'll do the next tranche after that. So it's a little bit of contribution that we have to the society. And like I said, we are not the only ones. Virtually every organization you talk to, virtually every individual you talk to has come forward to do something. It's been like a rallying call to kind of the PM Cares Fund as well as the related aspects. So I think it's been a huge, initiative by a lot of corporates and individuals that has helped the government, because we can't just really expect the government to do everything, right? I mean, it's got to be private partnership also. So that's a little bit of contribution.
Sure. No, we've all got to come together. I think that's what gives us hope, right? That
yes,
we are here to support each other. Yeah. And I think it's fantastic to hear the initiatives that you have taken, and working both on short term, the immediate need of migrant workers, as well as from a research, because we do need to find a long-term solution. It cannot be patched.
Yeah,
so
we cannot face this over and over again. Yeah.
Thank you so much for your insights. It is lovely talking to you, and I'm sure our listeners will enjoy the points you have made.